We have an exciting topic today, the potential hosting of the 2030 Olympic Winter Games. I want to welcome everyone. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. We've disabled the share screen and audio features for all participants except our panelists, but we will accept your questions through the chat feature. I'm going to ask Nick Thuriot, our communications director, to help manage that. And after we talk for a few minutes here, present a little bit of information, we'll open it up for your questions. So please feel free to put those in the chat. Our topic today is the potential bid for Salt Lake City, Utah, to host the 2030 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Utah is among the leading global candidates to host the 2030 Games. Our city enjoys the advantage of looking back on the lessons learned from hosting the 2002 Olympic Winter Games. And we have some new economic information to share. So before I introduce our guests, I want to walk through a recent economic study that's been completed by the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. As I open up the slide deck here, I want to thank Jennifer Robinson, John Downen, Andrea Brandley, and Jennifer Lever for their great work in pulling together this economic assessment. And I will just quickly walk through these so that you have the information. So this flow chart here gives you a really good sort of perspective on how we assess the economic impact of the games, how it works. And what we essentially do is take all this new direct spending. It's spending that's coming from broadcast rights, from visitors, from federal security expenditures. And we're taking that money, essentially a lot of detailed budget information, and then we're adjusting it to make sure that we only keep the money, we only enter into the models the money that is new to our state. So it has to come from out of state. It has to be adjusted for displacement. When we do that, we take out about $1 billion of out-of-state spending and displacement, and now we're left with $2.2 billion, this is in 2021 dollars, to put into our economic models and estimate the indirect and induced or multiplier effect of these funds. We estimate the 2030 Olympic Winter Games will have a $3.9 billion economic output contribution to our state. This is the equivalent of a sales number. It captures the gross amount of economic activity. We estimate about 30,000 job years of employment and an impact of 1.5 billion in personal income. And just to remind everyone, personal income is a measure of economic activity at the state level that's similar to a gross domestic product measure. At the state level, it includes all of the income, interest, dividends, rents, a broad measure of economic activity from the games. If we look at this over time, the output impacts look like this. You can see a ramping up period that peaks in 2030 and then has a dramatic drop off. But at its peak, we will have about 1.8 billion in output in our state. These are in 2021 dollars. Here's the personal income impacts. So you can see that similar types of things as new money comes into our state and is spent, is invested as we ramp up to host the games. And then you can see the employment impacts here peaking in the year of the games at just over 15,500 full and part-time jobs that are associated with not just the organizing committee, but also the economic impact that occurs in our state because of new investment in our state. We've also estimated the state and local fiscal impacts from the games. And this is a really important exercise. It's really an accounting exercise where we're looking at what's the relationship between economic growth and state revenues and economic growth and state expenditures. So we're not just looking at the revenue side, but what are the costs of this new economic growth? And you can see how this kind of plays out over time. and how we're kind of looking at that. But I guess I would just summarize by saying at the state level, $99 million in state revenue, offset by $78 million in expenditures, for a net of $22 million to the state. On the local side, $62 million in revenue, $20 million in expenditures, for a $42.2 million net benefit to the state. So that's a quick summary of our estimated economic and fiscal impact of the 2030 games. I will mention everyone that at gardner.utah.edu, and I'm sure Nick will put it up in the chat, you can see the full report. But these are solid economic numbers. We've done this before. We are real experts at understanding the economic impacts. Happy to take your questions about it, but I'm now going to introduce our newsmaker, Frasier Bullock. Frasier is a partner of Sorensen Capital and the former COO of the Salt Lake Organizing Committee of the 2002 Olympic Winter Games. Prior to that, he was among the founding members of Bain Capital and worked at Bain & Company. And Frasier is now the president and CEO of the Salt Lake City, Utah Committee for the Games, bidding to bring the games back to the Beehive State. Frasier, welcome.
Thank you, Natalie. And I sincerely appreciate the work of you and your team. It's always incredibly solid work that is well-founded, well thought through. And as a numbers guy, I get it and I appreciate it. So thank you for, once again, outstanding work.
Yeah, thank you, Frasier. It's definitely a good team here, and we were happy to do it.
Thank you. And just a couple of observations. Number one is when we look at the economic impact, it is less than '02, obviously, because of the infrastructure that had to be put in last time, but it's still a significant amount of a boost to our economy at $3.9 billion overall. And when we break that down, what we see is a big part of it is personal income, as you outlined. So it creates the opportunity for our citizens to have employment and maybe have a little bit of a diversion in their career to be able to do something different, contribute to our state like we did last time. A lot of people left great jobs, but they wanted to be part of the games. And we hired thousands and thousands of people. And we really experienced something special during that time frame. But then the other thing I'd like to point out is that even though we are in a strong economic boom at this point in time, our economy is by nature has cycles to it. And if we go back to 2002, you may recall that we had a negative cycle back in 2000 and 2001. So while everything looks great today, cycles inevitably happen. And what's nice about the Olympic Games being brought to a community is we can count on a certain amount of boost to our economic situation. And who knows what'll be happening in the lead up to 2030, but we'll have this extra layer of economic activity that we'll be able to rely on, even if there's a downturn in the economy like we experienced in 2000. It was really something that was beneficial to us back then. Yeah, thanks for making that observation, Frasier. You pointed out that we do estimate the impacts to be less than 2002. I wonder if you can comment for a minute on the difference in capital investment, because if I've got my numbers right and adjusted for 2021 dollars, the investments in 2002 for capital were upwards of $450 million. And in 2030, we expect those to be closer to the $25 million mark. Yes, while that's a negative to the economic impact side, it's a very big boost to our bid because all of the infrastructure is in place. The only capital that we need to do are are just some ongoing maintenance and upgrades at our existing venues, shading systems at the track, and various other things like that, that will make sure that our venues are completely up to date and ready for the games in 2030. But it's a very modest amount of capital relative to the overall budget for the games.
Yeah. Frasier, set the stage for us a little bit. Who are we competing against?
Well, we are competing against Vancouver, Sapporo, and Barcelona, all notable cities that have all hosted games in the past, although Barcelona was summer games. And we always say any city that's willing to put their hat in the ring to support the Olympic movement, we applaud that. We think our particular bid is very strong from many, many aspects, including the experience and the existing infrastructure we have in place.
Mm-hmm. And the selection process has changed quite a bit. What for our viewers here, how would you summarize the selection process? It feels a lot different to me as someone who watched the O2 process.
Yeah, in the prior system of selection of a city, it was very competitive, and everything came down to one day on at an IOC session with one vote in that particular day. This is much more of a partnership, collaborative process with the IOC, where they are giving us advice on how to make our bid the best it can be. We are constantly in contact with them, asking them questions and getting feedback, because we all want what's best for the Olympic movement. So we call that phase that we're in now a continuous dialogue. We registered to be part of that with the IOC, to be part of the continuous dialogue. We're in that phase now. We recently had a technical team from the IOC come visit our venues. And then eventually that would head into a targeted dialogue where, after the analysis by the IOC, particularly a group called the Future Host Commission, there's a summer edition and a winter edition, about 10 people, mostly IOC members, who are in discussion with us. They'll make a determination which city or cities should enter a targeted dialogue with the IOC. Then that Future Host Commission will recommend that to the executive board. The executive board will then review that, and if they agree with it, then they'll go back to the Future Host Commission to enter that targeted dialogue with a city or cities. And that targeted dialogue is to see if they can work out a contract between the host community and the IOC that then can be presented to the executive board for ratification. And then that would be a recommendation to the IOC general session, which would be in May of 2023. We believe that's the time when games would be awarded. But that's a little bit about the process, collaborative partnership, and hopefully there'll be a targeted dialogue maybe as early as the end of this year.
Hey, yeah, that is different. Frasier, so if I heard that right, you said we would know if we are a candidate by 2023 if that were to happen.
We would, I believe that we will know early 2023 that we are in a targeted dialogue. So that's kind of a candidate that's gone to the next level, that's in serious dialogue, and then the games be awarded in May of next year.
Got it. So we want to be really respectful of our partners in LA who have the games in 2028, if I've got that right. Help our viewers understand the dynamics there as we are in this position, Frasier.
Yes, the first thing is that LA needs to be incredibly successful, and they have our support. We're in dialogue with them, sharing some of our ideas from O2. They're sharing some ideas that they have for us for future games. And it's really been very collaborative. They're just great people, passionate about their games. But we recognize that with games only 18 months apart, there are certain areas that need to be worked through, and this is being led actually by the USOPC because they oversee all of this, and we're both collaborating with them. And as part of that, you say, okay, what are the risks, but what are the opportunities? And the risks are back-to-back games. You have domestic sponsorship dollars that can be limited. And so how would that work? We'd be in the market at the same time. You have to work out how all of that domestic sponsorship logistics or would logistically work out. But then there are many opportunities to collaborate on the cost side with people. And so we're in the process of identifying both sides of that to work through to see how we can be of assistance to LA to maybe help them be more successful in their games, and being sure that our games will be a net add to theirs if we go in 2030, and that there wouldn't be any negative impact to their games.
I'm seeing some questions come in the chat, so feel free to keep entering those, and we'll get to those in just a minute. Frasier, I want to pick up on the risks a little bit. And, you know, I don't know exactly how to calibrate that, except to say that we know that you can expect the unexpected when it comes to the future. And of course, in the 2002 games, 9/11 loomed large. We've just come through a global pandemic. What are you doing in the budget, in the bid process to manage those risks and to protect our state's interests?
So first and foremost is one of the things we want to do is have flexibility around our games. Because we don't know what's going to happen. And we forecast for everything we can imagine. So the first one is contingency planning. And we try to foresee different things that could happen, like a pandemic. How would that impact us? Therefore, how do we construct our budget, but also our contracts and operations, such that we can have the flexibility we need in the event of something significantly negative? And I'll give you a couple of examples. So number one, we have in our budget a $200 million contingency item, because we know that things happen, and we had a similar number back in 2002, and we worked through that, but we had a surplus. Even though we had the negative impact of 9/11, we were able to work through that. The second thing we do operationally is we have many contracts, such as venue use agreements, where we agree to pay rent for a facility. And rather than contracting those and guaranteeing payment today, if we're awarded the games, we have the ability to exit those contracts, whether they're hotel rooms, venue use agreements, as late as the September before the games. And so we have a lot of flexibility. If something has happened, we want to have flexibility in all of our contracts to be able to manage through that. And our partners have been very understanding of that. And we want to give them sufficient notice that it's not going to be a negative impact to their business, but also give us enough flexibility around that. The third thing we do, so we have contingency planning with a contingency budget. We have operational flexibility. And then the third element we have is games cancellation insurance or games postponement insurance. Now, there isn't a market for that today, given what's happened in Tokyo and Beijing. But those markets will come back, we believe. And so we've allocated $47 million as a premium that we would pay for games insurance. Now, we spent $2.5 million in 2002 for a $150 million policy of games cancellation insurance. Now, we have, if you look at that in today's, or in 2030 dollars, that's more like 4 million. So we've increased it by over 10 times because we want far more coverage. So we believe through the contingency in our budget, through flexible contracts, both on the revenue side and on the cost side, and through games risk insurance, that we can cover it because we know our obligation is to protect the Utah taxpayers. And so we're looking at that and working at that from every angle.
Yeah, I took note there. That was quite a list, Frasier. Frasier, another thing I wanted to ask you about, and I'm starting to get some texts and the chat starting to fill up with some questions. There's a lot of frustration about growth in our state. And there's also a lot of good feelings about it, meaning that we have prospered during a very difficult time in our country and a pandemic, related downturn. How do you think about Utah's growth challenges vis-a-vis the Olympics? This is an economic opportunity for the state. Our numbers show that, but we've also got challenges in congestion and air quality challenges. I'd love to hear how you as a leader in the games think about this growth dynamic and the challenges we have with growth coupled with the Olympics.
Yes, and I think a potential 2030 games is very different than 02. 02, we were not so much on the world map. And the impact of the games, raising our profile in 02, but also the burst of activity in really technology innovation in our state that has continued to grow, which was independent of the games. That was coming anyway. And then the fact that Utah is a wonderful recreation area and more people want to recreate. I don't want to overstate the impact of 02 because there are many other impacts. People love to live in Utah. It's a beautiful state. It's got a booming economy independent of the games from 02. So when we look at now 2030, we're already on the world map. That's not really going to change. So when I look at the economic, I look at it as a temporary boost, where when you look at the job years, it's really probably 7,000 or 8,000 people that are going, maybe new job growth, but those are somewhat temporary. So when we look at our employment base of millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people, the long-term impact of this is fairly limited in that number of maybe 6,000 to 8,000 full-time jobs for more than 1 year. When put in that context, it's really this temporary boost to be able to welcome the world, do something really special for the world. But in terms of long-term economic growth, I don't see that it's going to have much of an impact because this really is a temporary element, as your graphs well show.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thanks for that perspective. Frasier, I'm starting to get some direct messages and some questions, so let's just jump into these, and they'll jump all over the place a little bit. It was recently announced that a major hurdle for Sapporo, Japan was the large cost of new venue construction. How does this impact our bid, and what plans are there to upgrade or expand current venues?
Well, their announcement doesn't affect us. They have an independent bid, and more power to them. The people of Japan have been heroic in the Olympic movement, so I applaud them. When we look at our venues, fortunately, everything is not only in place, it's better. I mean, go to Vivint Arena. I mean, that place is off the charts, just exceptionally, well, it's an exceptional place to experience the games. And when I look at what they've done there, it's just fantastic.
I guess Bicycle Stadium would follow that as well, right?
Oh, Bicycle Stadium, when I look at the Ken Garff Red Zone and the South End Zone and the opportunity for hospitality, the expansion, it's great. Probably one of the biggest things is that the games for 2030 would have 40% more events and about 40% more athletes. And so we have to be able to house those athletes. When we look at the Olympic Village, not only has the expansion been extraordinary, but some of the facilities there, like the Eccles Student Life Center, I mean, that's a dream facility for any Olympian to utilize to train and exercise and work out. And so when we look at it, not only do we have everything in place, it's much stronger. And then also our transportation systems with public transport is much, much stronger. So in every way, we're stronger, and we don't have to make any of those infrastructure investments.
Yeah, that's, I hadn't thought of it in terms of venue by venue and how they're better. Interesting that you mentioned that 2030 is larger than 2002 in terms of the number of events and athletes. And that gets at one of the questions that I have here. So let's just opine about it. But we have someone asking, what are the major drivers of the employment numbers, if not in construction? And I guess part of how I would answer that is, yes, we have less construction, but we have a larger games. Fair enough.
Yes, and so when you look at the people and what they'll be doing, we have a large technology operation, which starts years before the games to have all of the technology ready. We have all of the planning relative to event services, event operations, all those pieces in place. So even though we're not building things, there is in the Olympic Games, we have 42 functions, which is mind-blowing, because in most companies have 6 or 8 functions: sales, marketing, manufacturing. We have 42 that have to be staffed. We have 5 transportation systems that have to be planned for athletes, Olympic family, media. So it's the amount of people involved really are operational people that make the games run.
Frasier, another question. Why focus on 2030 versus 2034?
Well, I selfishly say that I'm not getting any younger. Some other people seem to be beating the years better than I am able to do so. So I just hope for 2030, because one of the things that we want to do, besides just be younger, is that we are trying to do something special with our games. We're really trying to grow international sport, where we have in our budget an endowment for sport here in Utah of $300 million that we can leave behind. And actually, once we're awarded the games, we can start making those investments to allow more people in our community to participate in sport, have more people from the international communities come here to participate and compete. So seeing that effort and that expansion earlier rather than later, I think, is a benefit to our community. It's a vision that we're very excited about, that we would just love to get started earlier rather than later.
Yeah. Okay, another question. Oh, and I just a follow up on that. So the plan now is 2030, but all of the work that goes into 2030 can be pivoted to 2034 if that reality becomes true.
That's correct. Everything we're doing, whether it's our budget, whether it is our contracts, like our venue use agreements or our hotel agreements. For example, we have 17,000 hotel rooms under contract today. Each of them allow us to either exercise those hotel contracts in either 30 or 34. So yes, we aspire to 2030, but we recognize that everything has to line up for that to happen. And if it doesn't happen, we certainly would aggressively pursue 2034.
Got it. Frasier, we have a U of U alum who is now at UPenn and is working is thinking about public-private development and interested in the impact from the games on anchor venues and institutions. And in this case, events, various community development initiatives. So I interpret this question to be really about the interface, the intersection of the games and community development. How does it enrich the community and anchor venues, anchor institutions? I'd love to hear your comments on that.
Yes, that's one of our key philosophies and strategies is to be able to work with each community to understand what is important to them and to be able to be a catalyst in pushing forward their various initiatives. Like many of the communities are focused on sustainability. And while we can't write checks for sustainability items, having climate positive games is a requirement for 2030. So we will be working with the various communities on sustainability initiatives or other initiatives they have to be able to propel those forward with the impetus of the games carries can help carry momentum on various of these initiatives. So we're excited to do that. We're also conscious of the fact that in some communities they may be concerned about maybe too many people and too much growth or overcrowding during the Olympics. And so we'll work with them and say, okay, what's important to you? How can we balance this out to really understand how we can partner with them in meeting the needs of their communities?
Frasier, I'm going to turn the tables a little bit and let you ask me a couple of questions if you want. I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but the thought occurred to me. So in analyzing the economic impact, of course, I was involved in that, let's call it in the year 2000, thinking about 2002. Then we had the games, and then I was involved in it retrospectively, looking back and saying, what was the impact of the games? And now the Gardner Institute has looked at it for 2030. And so I've had 3 different times when I've been a part of a economic accounting exercise to put meaning to this outside money that comes into our state. We conclude that it makes a significant economic impact, generates jobs, income, and really in 2030 builds upon the significant success of 2002. You can't understate that. We're experienced and we know what we're doing in a way we haven't in the past. I mean, it just comes with doing it. So do you have any questions about the economics of it?
Well, I'm actually going to switch the tables on you a little bit.
Okay.
So, because I thought your economic impact report, as always, was exceptional. But given that you were in the fabric of the games completely back in 2002, what does it do for the state beyond economics? And I know you're going to have an upcoming update to your report, but how would you see 2030 being a benefit to our state beyond economics?
Well, what I experienced in 2002, so just for those watching, I was working in the governor's office at the time. And so, saw it from that vantage point. I learned in 2002 that when you have something this big, when the spotlight is this bright, that everything has to get better. That the forces of nature are such that we take care of things better, we invest better, we think harder about what we're doing because of the intensity and the seriousness of the endeavor that you're a part of. And so to me, the most important legacy of 2002 games is what it did for ourselves, for our confidence, for our ability to do things better in Utah. So if I project that now to 2030, what I see is a community that has a vision, a community that knows that it's a winter sports capital, a community that knows it can do these things in a very competent way. And as we do that, we're able to expand that into other parts of what we do in Utah. So I think it's very contagious, the good things that come from the games. That's been my experience, Frasier.
And if I may just pile on that a little bit, Natalie, one of the things that I enjoyed so much about the games, every night I would be downtown and I'd be at Salt Lake Olympic Square, and just seeing the tens of thousands of people together, it felt like unity in our community like never before. And I just see this as an opportunity. What happened with our games was the community coming together to put the games on and did such a fabulous job. The volunteers, the employees, everybody. But then just people who wanted to be part of it, whether they bought tickets or not, just being part of that feeling of unity. I look forward to that time again where it doesn't matter what political party, it doesn't matter what economic strata, everybody can come to a live site and just be together and feel that unity and celebrate the world coming together. That is such a unique feeling. And how can we take that and maybe utilize the games as a catalyst to be able to perpetuate that beyond just the 17 days of the games and the 10 days of the Paralympics?
Right. At its core, the Olympics are a community endeavor. And when we come together and do things together, we improve our state. Frasier, we've got a question sort of related to this. The person asked, what is being done on the part of the committee to emphasize the use of local vendors and suppliers during the games versus going out of state? Are there certain areas such as security where bidding outside of the state will be required, or are we able to keep it local?
Yeah, that's a very early question, but it's a very good one, because right now the only contracts we're doing are local, which are hotel rooms and venue use agreements, and those are all local. But obviously we'd have a big bias, as we did in '02, to utilize local businesses wherever possible. That's a philosophy. We love Utah. We want to use those people, and so we will endeavor, as we get to an OCOG phase, hopefully in the not too distant future, that will be a fundamental fabric of our approach to the community.
Yeah. So it would be natural, Frasier, to ask, who are the people making this happen? Who in our state are the leaders? Do you mind just giving a quick summary? I mean, I've been in settings where I've seen what Mayor Mendenhall's been doing, what Governor Cox is doing, but who's leading this effort for our state?
Well, and it does start with our political leaders. We are incredibly blessed to have great mayors. I mean, every one of our venue communities, our governor, Speaker of the House, Senate President, they're all so good and so supportive because they get it. And without that, we go nowhere. So they are fabulously supportive, enthusiastic, and they're infectious in their enthusiasm. And then within our group, we have myself as president and CEO. We have Catherine Rady Norman as our chair. She's a 4-time Olympian, and having an athlete as our chair it pays back in so many ways. She's just fantastic. And then we have Brett Hopkins, who is our COO and CFO. He was the CFO in '02, and he's just an amazing talent. We have Darren Hughes, who's our bid lead, and Darren knows bidding and games. He worked for us in '02. He knows everything about everything. It's just amazing, and he produces the work of like 10 people. And then we have Molly Mazzolini, who's a volunteer kind of in this senior management group that, and most of us are volunteers. I'm a volunteer, Kat's a volunteer, Brett's a volunteer. And then we have Colin Hilton, who is president and CEO of the Utah Olympic Legacy Foundation. And he works with us and does so much work with his staff. And it's kind of a new model where you have a sport organization, that and the Utah Sport Commission. We use Chase Robbins from the Sport Commission, Utah Sports Commission, as one of our kind of loaned employees. We use Colin, and then we use Tom Kelly in communications. And then we have Lisa Valiant, who keeps us all organized. So that's the core group.
Yeah, that's a great list.
And that's a great list, but hey, our budget is $3 million. And Chicago spent over $100 million with hundreds of people. So we're doing this very economically and mostly with volunteers.
We have a question about a 20-year drought and climate. So let me just read this to you and I'll let you respond. Anyone who watched the Beijing Games saw that whenever those cameras pulled back, there were brown, muddy hillsides. We've been in our bid efforts, we have said that we'll have a climate positive games, but with the drought, please touch on the climate concerns and contingencies.
Yes, and we actually cited a study that was published in the New York Times, and this was in our OEC report back in 2018. where it showed that Utah, when you look at past hosts of winter games, about half of them fall out by 2050. Fortunately, Utah is still going strong in 2050, but obviously the seasons are getting shorter. We're fortunate in that the games are right in the middle of the cold season. So even in the face of a drought, we can make snow if we're not getting the natural snow. And so we'll have resources to be able to make that snow as needed. In fact, having man-made snow mixed in with natural snow is makes for good conditions. But and we, back in '02, we stockpiled snow. We had it up at Strawberry Reservoir for Soldier Hollow just in case. So that will be very much a contingency plan, but fortunately, that time of year, we should be in very good condition to be able to host games.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Just a couple more and we'll finish this, Frasier. We've had someone reach out asking about air quality, the idea that we won't be shutting down factories or other drastic measures, but how is the bid factoring into the conversation the need to improve Utah's air quality? Is the Olympics a motivator for this?
Absolutely. I think it's a huge, huge catalyst. And for 2030, we do have to be climate positive. And if you're climate positive, then you're also having a collateral positive impact on air quality. I am huge on air quality. I have one electric car and I have 2 more on order. So I'm just saying I'm voting with my feet, because I believe that given the unique geography that bad air gets trapped in here, we have to do more. And we will be big advocates of doing that, because when we welcome the world here, we could be in an inversion and we don't want to see that bad air during that time. So we're hopeful that we can make major strides towards not only sustainability, but clean air by 2030.
What about advancements in technology since 2002, whether it's security, snowmaking? How will these games be different from a technological perspective if we're successful in landing them?
They will be massively different, mostly from the perspective of fan engagement. With the emergence of Web 3.0 and some of the things that are coming, to be able to have fans feel part of the games, even though they might not be in the stands or on the field of play, really having them feel part of the games and tied to our community and athletes from our community. We are already doing some early planning on that, and it just blows our minds what's going to be possible even 2 to 3 years from now, let alone 2030. So that's going to be the major element of leveraging technology.
Okay, and then 2 more here. How much money do we save because of Utah's volunteer spirit?
Well, I think we saved, when you look at it back in '02 and today, I think in '02, when you take 24,000 volunteers, and by the way, the ad to recruit our volunteers was hard work, no pay, long hours, better hurry. That was our main ad. And people signed up. We had over 60,000 people sign up to be volunteers. And if you look at that, that's millions, tens of millions of dollars that we saved because of Utah volunteering. And when I look at what we're doing today, even in our bid today, we're very modest costs. We're saving millions and millions of dollars today by virtue of utilizing volunteers. And whether they're in our small staff or whether they're other people, we have all kinds of people saying, can I help? University of Utah, can we host an event here? Yes, okay. So it's not just our small group, it's everybody in the community. They're just coming together, and it's so heartwarming, and it puts kind of the winds at our back to be able to move this bid forward.
Frasier, it's been wonderful spending the time with you. I wanted, as the last question, to ask you to just put into words the living legacy that is the Olympics in Utah. We're one of a few privileged places in the world that is a part of the Olympic family. A lot of communities haven't been able to make it a living legacy. In this state, it lives. Can you just put some words to that, and then we'll wrap up?
Sure, thank you. Well, I'll answer that two ways. Number one, I think for many of us, the living legacy is in our hearts and our minds, because we remember those wonderful days of being together and hosting the world, days never to be forgotten. But then I remember being with the, just a couple of weeks ago with the IOC Technical Review Committee, and we were down at Peaks Ice Arena, which you would think, okay, that's one of our smaller venues, which it is. What's happened down there? And for a few years post games, they had to work out how to make the operations work. They're now profitable. And they have the 2 ice sheets. And when we were there visiting, I saw some kids playing hockey on one ice sheet, and they're just having a blast. And then on the other sheet, I saw the figure skaters, and I saw a little girl. She looked like she was 3 years old, and she's trying to learn how to figure skate. And it just warmed my heart to see these young kids out there utilizing these just for recreation. Maybe some of them will go on to elite competition. Most won't, but they love sport. They love being together. They love competing together. And when I look at that, and then I extrapolate to all of our venues and the sport and activities that are going on there, it just makes me feel so good about the legacy that lives in our communities every day through our kids and others.
Very well said, Frasier. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time this morning. This concludes our Newsmaker Breakfast. I want to give a special thank you to Frasier. I also want to thank the Gardner team who worked on the economic report: Jennifer Robinson, John Dowman, Andrea Brandley, Jennifer Lever, and Paul Springer. Our next Newsmaker will be in early June. We've got an incredible topic. We're going to be talking about Utah's economically disadvantaged students and higher education. Stay tuned for further details. If you have questions, comments, feedback, we encourage you to write us at gardnerinstitute@eccles.utah.edu. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.